The morning air on Kepler 442b felt wrong. Sergeant Jake Morrison crouched behind a fallen tree, watching the valley below through his rifle scope. The planet looked peaceful enough with its purple grass and orange sky, but something made his skin crawl. 20 years of military service had taught him to trust that feeling. "See anything down there, Sarge?" Corporal Lisa Bennett whispered from his left. She was young, maybe 25, but she had good instincts. Jake had requested her for this mission himself. "Nothing yet," Jake replied, adjusting his scope. "But stay sharp. Intel said there might be hostile activity in this sector." Private Danny Torres shifted nervously behind them. At 19, he was the youngest member of their 4-person squad. "How long are we supposed to sit here? My legs are going numb." "As long as it takes," said Private Amy Rodriguez, checking her ammunition for the 3rd time. She was always prepared, always ready. Jake respected that about her. The UES Vanguard had dropped them on this remote planet 3 days ago. Their mission was simple: scout for signs of alien activity and report back. The Outer Rim had seen strange ship movements lately, and Command wanted to know if humanity had new neighbors. Jake hoped they were friendly neighbors. A flash of silver caught his eye in the valley. Jake focused his scope and felt his blood turn cold. Ships, 3 of them, sleek and unfamiliar, sitting in a clearing like sleeping predators. They were definitely not human design. "We've got company," Jake whispered into his radio. 3 unknown vessels, approximately 2 clicks south of our position. "Copy that, Morrison," came the reply from orbit. "Get closer and gather intel, but do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." Jake motioned to his squad. They moved down the hillside carefully, using the strange purple vegetation for cover. The gravity here was lighter than Earth, making each step feel bouncy and unnatural. Jake had to concentrate to avoid making noise. As they got closer, Jake could see the ships more clearly. They were beautiful in a deadly way, with curved hulls that seemed to flow like water. Strange symbols covered their surfaces, and a low, humming sound filled the air around them. "Those aren't like anything in our databases," Lisa whispered. Jake nodded. "Amy, start recording everything. Danny, watch our 6. Lisa, you're with me." They crept to within 50 meters of the nearest ship. Jake was about to signal for a closer look when the world exploded around them. Energy beams erupted from hidden positions in the trees. The air filled with a high-pitched whining sound as the weapons fired. Jake dove for cover, pulling Lisa down with him as purple energy bolts sizzled overhead. "Ambush!" he shouted. "Find cover!" But there was nowhere to hide. The aliens had planned this perfectly. Energy nets dropped from above, crackling with electricity. Jake tried to roll away, but the net caught him, sending painful shocks through his body. His muscles seized up, and his rifle fell from numb fingers. Through the sparks and pain, he saw his squad being captured one by one. Danny tried to run but tripped in the light gravity. Amy fought hard, landing several shots before an energy net brought her down. Lisa managed to take cover behind a rock, but 3 aliens in strange armor surrounded her. The aliens themselves were unlike anything Jake had ever seen. They stood 7 feet tall on powerful legs with scales that shimmered. green and gold in the orange sunlight. Their faces were long and narrow, with bright yellow eyes that seemed to glow with intelligence. They moved with predatory grace, like hunting cats made of muscle and armor. One of them, wearing more elaborate armor than the others, approached Jake's trapped form. When it spoke, a device on its chest translated the words into perfect English. "Humans," the alien said, its voice carrying a mix of curiosity and disdain. "We have heard rumors of your species, but this is our first encounter. You are smaller than we expected." Jake tried to speak, but the energy net's shocks made his jaw clench uncontrollably. The alien leader seemed amused by his struggle. "Duh. Not attempt to resist. We are the Zephyrian Empire, conquerors of 17 star systems. Your weapons are primitive. Your tactics predictable. You will come with us." More aliens emerged from the forest. Jake counted at least 20 of them, all armed with energy weapons that looked decades ahead of human technology. His squad never had a chance. The aliens loaded the captured humans into one of their ships. The interior was cramped but efficient, with curved walls that seemed grown rather than built. Jake found himself strapped to a wall next to his squad members, all of them still twitching from the energy nets. "Is everyone okay?" he managed to whisper when the shocks finally stopped. "I think so," Lisa replied. Her young face was pale but determined. "What do they want with us?" "Nothing good," Amy said grimly. She had a cut on her forehead, but her eyes were still alert. Danny looked terrified. "Are they going to kill us?" Before Jake could answer, the alien leader entered their holding area. It studied them with those unsettling yellow eyes like a scientist examining interesting insects. "You will not be harmed unnecessarily," it said through its translator. "You are too valuable for that. The Zephyrian Empire has many uses for new species, especially ones that show promise in combat." "Combat?" Jake asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. The alien's face twisted into what might have been a smile, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Our people enjoy contests of strength and skill. Gladiatorial games, you might call them. The grand arena on our capital world has hosted such entertainment for over 1,000 years. Jake's heart sank. He had read about ancient Rome in school, about humans forced to fight for the amusement of crowds. The idea that an alien civilization might do the same thing had never occurred to him. "We study our gladiators carefully before they fight," the alien continued. "Your species is unknown to us. We must learn your capabilities, your weaknesses, your breaking points. This will make the games more interesting for our audiences." The ship shuddered as it left the planet's atmosphere. Through a small window, Jake could see Kepler 442b shrinking away below them. Somewhere up there, the UES Vanguard was waiting for their report, but that report would never come. "How long until we reach your world?" Jake asked. 3 standard days in hyperspace," the alien replied. "I suggest you use that time to prepare yourselves mentally. The Grand Arena has never hosted human gladiators before. You will be quite the novelty." As the alien left, Jake looked at his squad. They were scared, confused, and far from home. but they were Marines, trained to adapt and overcome. Whatever these Zephyrians had planned for them, Jake would find a way to protect his people. The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying them toward an uncertain fate among the stars. The ship dropped out of hyperspace with a shudder that Jake felt in his bones. Through the small window, he watched as a massive planet came into view. Zephyr Prime was nothing like Earth. The surface was covered in gleaming cities that stretched across entire continents, connected by bridges and towers that reached up into the clouds. "Look at the size of those cities," Lisa whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the ship's engines. Jake studied the planet below. The technology here was centuries ahead of anything humanity had achieved. Flying vehicles moved between the towering structures like schools of fish, and the cities themselves seemed to pulse with energy. This was the heart of an empire that had conquered 17 star systems. "Stay together," Jake told his squad as the ship began its descent. "Whatever happens down there, we watch each other's backs." Danny nodded nervously. The young Marine had barely slept during the 3-day journey. Amy checked her uniform one more time, straightening it despite their circumstances. Even as prisoners, she maintained her military bearing. The ship landed with barely a bump. Jake heard footsteps in the corridor outside their holding area, then the door slid open. 4 Zephyrian guards entered, their scales gleaming under the ship's lights. They wore different armor now, more ceremonial-looking with flowing capes and elaborate helmets. "Come," one of them said through a translator device. "The High Commander wishes to see the humans before you are processed." The guards led them off the ship and onto a landing platform high above the city. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The scale of everything was overwhelming. Buildings stretched as far as he could see, each one taller than any skyscraper on Earth. Flying vehicles filled the air like metallic birds, and in the distance, Jake could see what looked like a small moon hanging in the sky. "That is our primary shipyard," one of the guards said, noticing Jake's stare. "We build our fleet there. Your species has never seen technology like this, have you?" Jake didn't answer. He was too busy studying everything around them, looking for weaknesses, escape routes, anything that might help later. The platform they stood on was at least 1,000 feet above the ground, with no obvious way down except through Zephyrian-controlled areas. A transport vehicle arrived, sleek and silent. The guards pushed the humans inside, and they flew through the city toward what looked like a massive crater in the planet's surface. As they got closer, Jake realized it wasn't a crater at all. It was a structure so large it seemed to have been carved from the planet itself. "The Grand Arena," one of the guards announced with obvious pride. "Home to 1,000 years of glorious combat." The arena was beyond anything Jake could have imagined. It was easily 50 miles across, with walls that rose up into the clouds. The outer surface was covered in carvings and statues of alien creatures in combat poses. Thousands of smaller structures surrounded it, connected by bridges and walkways that formed a complex web around the main building. Their transport flew through an opening in the arena's wall and into a tunnel system that seemed to go on forever. Jake counted dozens of branching passages as they flew deeper into the structure. This place was like an underground city built specifically for combat and death. They finally stopped at a platform deep inside the arena. More guards waited for them, along with an alien that was clearly important. This one wore armor covered in precious metals and gems, and its scales had been decorated with intricate patterns. When it spoke, its voice was deeper and more commanding than the others. "I am High Commander Vextar," it said. "Welcome to the Grand Arena, humans. You are about to become part of something greater than your small minds can comprehend." Jake stepped forward, keeping his expression neutral. "What do you want from us?" Vextar circled them slowly, like a predator studying prey. "Want? We want entertainment. The arena has hosted death matches for over a millennium. Creatures from across the galaxy have fought and died here for the amusement of the Zephyrian people." The alien gestured toward the walls around them. Jake could see viewing screens showing different areas of the arena complex. Some showed empty fighting pits. Others showed cages filled with creatures he couldn't identify. This arena was built to contain the galaxy's most dangerous predators, Vextar continued. The energy barriers you will encounter can hold beings that have destroyed entire planets. The weapons and traps have been perfected over centuries of use. Amy spoke up for the first time since leaving the ship. "You're talking about murder for entertainment." Vexatar's yellow eyes fixed on her. "I am talking about glory. Only the strongest survive in our arena. Only the most skilled, the most cunning, the most ruthless. It is the ultimate test of a species' worth." The High Commander led them deeper into the complex, through corridors lined with statues of past champions. Jake read the plaques beneath each statue, noting that most champions had very short careers. The longest had survived for 6 months before dying in combat. "Your species is unknown to us," Vextar said as they walked. "We have never tested humans in combat against our arena's challenges. This makes you valuable. The crowds will pay handsomely to see what these humans can do." They entered a large chamber filled with holding cells. Jake could see dozens of different alien species in the cages, all of them clearly prisoners waiting for their turn in the arena. Some looked intelligent, others more like wild animals. All of them looked dangerous. "You will be separated," Vextar announced. "Each of you will face different trials to test your individual capabilities. Only one of you will be allowed to live long enough to see our primary games." Jake felt his heart sink. "You're going to make us fight each other." "Eventually," Vextar replied with that disturbing smile. "But first, you must prove that you are worthy opponents. The crowd expects a good show, and we have a reputation to maintain." Guards began separating the squad. Jake tried to resist as they pulled him away from his people, but energy restraints held him fast. He watched helplessly as Lisa, Danny, and Amy were led to different sections of the holding area. "Jake," Lisa called out before disappearing around a corner, "don't give up." "I won't," he shouted back, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. A guard pushed Jake into a small cell with walls made of the same energy that had captured him on the planet. He touched the barrier experimentally and jerked his hand back as electricity shot through his fingers. "Your first trial begins tomorrow," the guard told him. "I suggest you rest. You will need your strength for what comes next. Alone in his cell, Jake sat on the narrow bench and tried to make sense of his situation. Somewhere in this massive complex, his squad members were probably doing the same thing. They were trained Marines, but this was unlike any enemy they had ever faced. The arena had been built to hold monsters, and now he was trapped inside it. But Jake Morrison had survived 20 years of military service by refusing to give up. No matter how bad things looked, he wasn't about to start now. Jake woke to the sound of his cell door opening. He had barely slept, spending most of the night thinking about his squad and studying the energy barriers that held him prisoner. A Zephyrian guard stood in the doorway, holding what looked like primitive weapons. "Time for your first trial, human," the guard said. "Take these." Jake looked at the weapons the guard offered. There was a short sword made of some kind of metal he didn't recognize, a wooden shield, and a spear with a stone tip. They looked like something from ancient Earth history. "That's it?" Jake asked. "No armor? No modern weapons?" The guard scowled. Face showed amusement. "The arena provides what it chooses. Your opponent has no weapons at all, only what nature gave it. We believe in fair fights." Jake picked up the weapons, testing their weight and balance. The sword was heavier than it looked, but well made. The shield was solid wood reinforced, with metal bands. The spear felt crude but deadly. Two more guards joined the first one, and they led Jake through a maze of corridors. The walls were covered with more statues and carvings, showing battles between different alien species. Jake noticed that most of the carvings showed one creature standing over the broken body of another. They passed viewing windows that looked down into fighting pits below. In one, Jake saw a spider-like creature the size of a car fighting something that looked like a walking tree. In another, two wolf-like aliens circled each other with obvious intelligence in their eyes. The sounds of combat echoed through the corridors. "Popular entertainment?" Jake asked one of his guards. "The most popular," the guard replied. "Billions across the Empire watch our broadcasts. Today, they will see their first human in combat." They reached a preparation area next to a large tunnel that led into bright light. Jake could hear the roar of a massive crowd beyond the tunnel. The sound was like thunder that never stopped. "Your opponent today is a Carathian dreadnought," one of the guards explained. "It has won 47 consecutive fights. No gladiator has ever defeated one in single combat." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "And you expect me to fight it with these?" He held up the primitive weapons. "We expect you to die," the guard said simply, "but perhaps you will entertain the crowd while you do it. That is all we ask." Another guard handed Jake a small device. "This translator will let the crowd hear your final words. Try to make them memorable." Before Jake could respond, the guards pushed him toward the tunnel. He walked forward into the bright light, and the sound of the crowd became deafening. The arena floor was larger than a football field, covered in sand that showed dark stains from previous battles. The walls rose up on all sides, lined with thousands of Zephyrian spectators. Jake looked up at the crowd. They were all watching him with the same predatory interest their guards had shown. Some held small devices that were probably recording his every move. Others called out in their alien language, and Jake's translator picked up fragments. Look how small it is. Will it run? This should be quick. A gate opened on the opposite side of the arena, and Jake's opponent emerged. The Carathian dreadnought was everything the guards had promised and worse. It stood 12 feet tall on legs like tree trunks. 4 massive arms extended from its torso, each one ending in claws the size of sword blades. Its head was small compared to its body, but Jake could see intelligence in its black eyes. The creature looked at Jake and made a sound like grinding stone. It began walking toward him slowly, confidently, like it was taking a casual stroll. The crowd's excitement grew louder. Jake gripped his weapons tighter and tried to think. 20 years of Marine training kicked in automatically. Study your enemy. Look for weaknesses. Use every advantage you can find. The dreadnought was huge and strong, but that size might make it slow. 4 arms meant it could attack from multiple angles, but it also meant it might have trouble coordinating all of them. And the way it moved suggested it was used to easy victories against terrified opponents. Jake started moving to his right, keeping his distance. The dreadnought followed, still taking its time. It seemed to be enjoying the fear it expected to see in Jake's eyes. But Jake wasn't afraid anymore. He was focused. This was what he had trained for his entire adult life. Combat against a superior enemy using whatever tools were available. The dreadnought suddenly lunged forward with surprising speed. 2 of its arms swept toward Jake from different directions while a third tried to grab him. Jake dove and rolled, feeling claws pass inches from his head. The crowd roared its approval. Jake came up running and struck at the creature's leg with his spear. The stone tip scraped against thick hide but didn't penetrate. The dreadnought spun faster than Jake expected and backhanded him with one massive arm. Jake flew through the air and hit the arena wall hard. His vision blurred, and he tasted blood. The crowd was on its feet now, screaming for his blood. The dreadnought approached again, more confident than ever. But as Jake struggled to his feet, he noticed something important. The creature favored its right side when it turned. Its left leg moved differently than its right, like it had been. Injured before and never fully healed. Jake feinted left, then dodged right as the dreadnought attacked again. This time he was ready for its speed. He slashed with his sword at the creature's left ankle, putting all his strength behind the blow. The blade bit deep, and dark blood splattered the arena sand. The dreadnought roared in pain and stumbled. Jake didn't give it time to recover. He thrust his spear at the same injured leg, driving the stone point between 2 scales. The creature fell to one knee, and Jake saw his chance. He dropped the spear and shield, gripped his sword with both hands, and leapt onto the dreadnought's back. The creature tried to reach him with its 4 arms, but its size worked against it now. It couldn't bend far enough to grab him. Jake drove, his sword down into the base of the creature's skull, where the thick hide was thinnest. The dreadnought thrashed wildly, then went still. The arena fell silent. Jake stood on top of his fallen opponent, breathing hard and bleeding from several cuts. He looked up at the crowd and saw something he hadn't expected. Shock. They had never seen their champion defeated, especially not by such a small opponent. Then, the silence broke and the crowd erupted in a mixture of cheers and angry shouts. Some seemed excited by the unexpected victory, while others appeared upset that their favorite had lost. Guards rushed onto the arena floor. They seemed as surprised as the crowd by what had happened. One of them approached Jake cautiously, as if he might attack them too. "How?" the guard asked. "No one has ever defeated a Korathian dreadnought in single combat." Jake wiped blood from his mouth and looked down at the dead creature. "It was big and strong," he said, "but it was also overconfident. It didn't think I could hurt it, so it didn't bother to protect itself properly." As the guards led him back to the preparation area, Jake heard the crowd still arguing about what they had witnessed. Some called it luck, others seemed impressed by his tactics, but Jake knew it wasn't luck. It was something the Zephyrians didn't seem to understand about humans. They could adapt, learn, and overcome even when the odds were against them. He had won his first trial, but he knew this was only the beginning. Jake spent 3 days in his cell after killing the Korathian dreadnought. The guards brought him food and water, but they watched him differently now. Before, they had looked at him like he was an interesting animal. Now they looked at him like he might be dangerous. On the 4th day, Jake heard familiar voices in the corridor outside his cell. His heart jumped as he recognized Lisa's laugh, even though it sounded tired. A few minutes later, guards brought her past his cell on the way to the arena preparation area. "Lisa!" Jake called out, pressing against the energy barrier of his cell. She turned and saw him. Her face was bruised and her uniform was torn in several places, but she was alive. "Jake, I heard you killed one of their champions. The other prisoners are talking about it." "Are you okay? Where are Danny and Amy?" "I'm fine. Amy's 2 levels down. Danny—" Lisa's expression darkened. "Danny didn't make it through his first trial. I'm sorry, Jake." Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Danny Torres had been 19 years old, barely out of training. He should have been home with his family, not dying in an alien arena for entertainment. "I have to go," Lisa said as the guards pulled her away. "My turn in the pit." Jake watched helplessly as they led her toward the arena. He could hear the crowd roaring in the distance, but he couldn't see what was happening. All he could do was wait and hope she would survive whatever they had planned for her. 2 hours later, the guards brought Lisa back. She was alive, but exhausted, with new cuts on her arms and a burn mark on her shoulder. They put her in a cell across the corridor from Jake's. "What did they make you fight?" Jake asked when the guards left. "Some kind of metal creature," Lisa replied. "It shot electricity from its hands. I managed to damage its power source and shut it down, but barely." Jake was proud of her quick thinking, but also worried. The Zephyrians were testing them, learning their capabilities. Each trial would probably be harder than the last. Over the next few days, Jake began mapping the prison area in his mind. He listened to guard conversations and watched their routines. He also started talking to other prisoners in nearby cells. Most of them had been here for weeks or months, waiting for their turn to die in the arena. One prisoner was particularly helpful. It was a creature that looked like a walking lizard, but it spoke perfect galactic common through Jake's translator. It had been captured from a world the Zephyrians had conquered 6 months ago. "You are the human who killed the dreadnought," the creature said. I watched on the viewing screen in my cell. Very impressive. Thanks, Jake replied. What's your name? I am Crix. I was a teacher on my world before they brought me here. Now I teach survival to new prisoners. It helps pass the time while we wait to die. What can you tell me about this place? Crix moved closer to the energy barrier between their cells. The arena has many levels. We are in the holding area for individual trials. Below us are the training areas and the beast pens. Above us are the private viewing boxes for important Zephyrians. Beast pens? Creatures from across the galaxy. Some are intelligent like us, others are just dangerous animals. They use them for different types of matches. Jake filed this information away. Every detail might be important later. The next morning, guards came for Jake again. This time, they gave him different weapons: a net, a trident, and a small shield. The weapons felt even more primitive than his last set. Your opponent today will test your adaptability, one guard said. The crowd wants to see if your victory over the dreadnought was skill or luck. They led Jake through the familiar corridors to the arena. The crowd seemed larger this time, and Jake noticed that some of the spectators in the expensive seats were pointing at him and talking excitedly. Word about the human gladiator was spreading. When the gate opened on the opposite side of the arena, Jake saw something that made his blood run cold. Not one creature, but 6 of them. They looked like giant lizards with acid green scales. Each, one about the size of a large dog. Their mouths dripped with something that hissed when it hit the sand. Hydran hunters! The arena announcer's voice boomed across the stadium. Pack predators from the poison worlds of Sector 7. Their acid can melt through metal in seconds. The 6 creatures spread out immediately, showing pack hunting intelligence. They began circling Jake, staying just out of reach of his weapons. When one of them spat acid at him, Jake dodged quickly. The acid hit the arena wall behind him and ate through the stone like it was paper. Jake realized that fighting these creatures the normal way would get him killed quickly. They were too fast, too coordinated, and too deadly. He needed a different approach. Instead of attacking, Jake began moving toward the center of the arena, forcing the pack to circle tighter around him. He watched their movement patterns, looking for the leader. In most pack animals, there was always one that the others followed. He found it. The largest Hydran hunter stayed slightly behind the others, directing their movements with small sounds and gestures. If Jake could capture the leader, he might be able to control the whole pack. But how could he capture something that could melt through any restraints with its acid? Then Jake remembered something from his training about animal behavior. Most predators avoided injuring their own pack members. Jake waited until 2 of the hunters attacked from opposite sides. Instead of dodging away, he dove forward and grabbed one of them around the neck with his net. The creature struggled and tried to spit acid at him, but Jake held it in front of himself like a shield. The other hunters stopped their attack immediately. They wouldn't risk hurting their packmate. Jake slowly backed toward the arena wall, dragging his captured hunter with him. He used torn strips from his uniform to bind the creature's mouth shut, preventing it from spitting acid. The other hunters followed but kept their distance. When Jake reached the wall, he did something that shocked the entire arena. He began talking to the captured hunter in a calm, gentle voice. He stroked its scales carefully, avoiding the acid glands. Slowly, the creature stopped struggling. The crowd fell silent. No gladiator had ever tried to tame an arena beast before. Jake continued working with the captured hunter, using patience and gentle movements. Within an hour, the creature was responding to simple commands. When Jake pointed at one of its packmates, it made a specific sound, and that hunter lay down on the sand. By the end of the match, Jake had all 6 Hydran hunters following his commands. The arena erupted in confusion. Guards rushed onto the field, not sure whether to kill the beasts or remove them safely. High Commander Vextar appeared in the royal box, his yellow eyes fixed on Jake with newfound interest. "Impossible!" Vexatar said into his communicator, loud enough for Jake to hear. "No one has ever tamed arena beasts. This human is either very lucky or very dangerous." As the guards led Jake back to his cell, he carried one of the smaller hunters with him. The guards were too shocked to stop him. "What are you doing?" Crix asked, when Jake returned to the prison area. Jake smiled as he set up a makeshift pen for his new companion. "Learning," he said, "and maybe changing the rules of their game." Word about Jake's tamed Hydran hunters spread through the prison levels like wildfire. Other prisoners pressed against their energy barriers to get a look at the small creature that followed Jake around his cell like a loyal pet. The guards didn't know what to do about it, so they left it alone. "This is unprecedented," Crix whispered from his cell across the corridor. "In all the arena's history, no gladiator has ever kept a beast as a companion." Jake scratched behind the hunter's scaled head, and it made a purring sound. Maybe that's because no one ever tried talking to them instead of just fighting them. Over. The next week, more prisoners began talking to Jake. They came from dozens of different worlds, each with their own story of how the Zephyrian Empire had destroyed their lives. There was Zara, a pilot from the crystal cities of Novus Prime. Her people were peaceful traders until the Empire decided they wanted the planet's rare minerals. There was Thorek, a massive warrior from the ice world of Frostheim who had watched his entire army fall to Zephyrian weapons. "How long have you been here?" Jake asked Thorek during one of their conversations. 8 months, the ice warrior replied. His voice was deep and sad. "I have fought 17 times. Each victory only means I live long enough for a harder opponent." Jake learned that the arena worked on a simple system. Prisoners fought until they died or became too injured to continue. The few who survived long enough became celebrities, but even the greatest champions eventually fell. The current record holder was a creature called Maxis the Destroyer, who had won 43 consecutive matches before dying in his 44th. "What made Maxis so successful?" Jake asked. "Strength and rage," Zara answered. "He killed everything they put in front of him. But he never made friends, never tried to understand his opponents. In the end, that's what killed him." Jake thought about this as he continued training his Hydran hunter. The little creature was incredibly smart and seemed eager to learn. Jake taught it simple commands and even some basic tricks. More importantly, he was learning about its natural abilities and instincts. On his 10th day in the prison, Jake woke to find guards installing a new energy barrier between his cell and the corridor. The new barrier allowed sound to pass through more clearly, and Jake realized why when High Commander Vextar appeared with several other important-looking Zephyrians. "So this is the human who tames arena beasts," Vextar said, studying Jake, with those unsettling yellow eyes. "Show me." Jake looked at the officials, then at his hunter companion. He gave a simple hand signal, and the creature stood on its hind legs and balanced there for several seconds. The Zephyrians murmured among themselves in amazement. "Interesting," Vextar said. "Tell me, human, how do you communicate with this creature?" "The same way I communicate with anyone," Jake replied. "Patience, respect, and trying to understand what they need." "And what does it need?" Jake scratched the hunter's head again. "Same thing we all need. Food, safety, companionship. It's not that different from any intelligent being." Vextar's expression changed slightly. "You believe this creature is intelligent?" "I know it is. It learns. It remembers. It has preferences and fears. Just because it can't speak your language doesn't mean it can't think." The other Zephyrians looked uncomfortable with this idea. One of them, wearing elaborate robes covered in scientific symbols, stepped forward. "Impossible," the scientist said. "Hydran hunters are simple predators. They operate on instinct alone." "Then explain how it learned to respond to my commands in less than a day," Jake challenged. "Instinct doesn't work that fast." The scientist had no answer for that. Vexatar studied Jake for a long moment, then nodded to the guards. "You will face a special trial tomorrow," the High Commander announced. "Something that will test these theories of yours." After the officials left, Crix called out from his cell. "That was either very brave or very stupid, human." "Probably both," Jake admitted. "But I'm tired of watching them treat thinking beings like mindless animals." That night, Jake barely slept. He spent the time talking quietly to other prisoners, sharing what he had learned about communication and cooperation. Many of them seemed interested in his ideas, though some were too broken by their time in the arena to believe that anything could change. The next morning brought more guards than usual. They led Jake through different corridors he hadn't seen before, deeper into the arena complex. His Hydran hunter companion trotted alongside him, drawing stares from every guard they passed. They emerged into a fighting pit that was larger than the main arena. The walls were lined with cages containing various creatures, all of them watching Jake with different levels of intelligence in their eyes. Some looked like simple animals, but others clearly showed the same awareness he had, seen in his hunter companion. "Your trial today is unique," Vextar's voice echoed from speakers around the pit. "You will face not one opponent, but 5 different species. All of them are considered untamable. All of them have killed previous gladiators who tried to befriend them." Jake felt his stomach tighten as the first cage opened. A creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a tiger emerged, its red eyes fixed on Jake with obvious hunger. Its claws were as long as swords, and it moved with deadly grace. But Jake noticed something else. The creature's movements were careful, calculated. It wasn't just a mindless predator, it was thinking, planning its approach. "Easy," Jake said softly, holding up his hands to show he wasn't carrying weapons. "I'm not here to hurt you." The creature stopped, tilted its head, and made a questioning sound. Jake took a small step forward, still talking in the same calm voice he had used with his hunter companion. The crowd in the viewing areas fell silent. This wasn't how gladiatorial matches were supposed to work. Over the next hour, Jake did something that had never been done in the arena's 1,000-year history. He made contact with each of the 5 untamable creatures. The bear-tiger responded to gentle movements and patient words. A crystal-scaled serpent that could have crushed him in seconds instead coiled around his arm like a friendly pet. A bird-like creature with razor-sharp feathers perched on his shoulder and sang softly. By the end of the trial, Jake stood in the center of the pit, surrounded by 5 creatures that should have killed him. Instead, they were following his simple commands and showing what could only be called affection. The arena was completely silent. Even the guards looked stunned. "Impossible," Vextar's voice finally came over the speakers. "This violates everything we know about these species." Jake looked up at the viewing box, where he knew the High Commander was watching. "Maybe the problem isn't what you know about them," he called out. "Maybe the problem is that you never bothered to really look." As the guards led him back to his cell, now accompanied by 6 different creatures who had chosen to follow him, Jake realized something important. He wasn't just winning battles anymore. He was changing minds. And in a place built on violence and death, that might be the most dangerous thing he could do. But it was also the most human thing he could do. And maybe, just maybe, it was the key to something bigger than just survival. The drums beat across the arena as the Festival of Victory began. Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal bars of his cell, watching thousands of Valdrani nobles fill the seats above. Their purple robes gleamed under the bright lights, and their voices echoed through the massive structure like thunder. This was the Empire's biggest holiday, when they celebrated their conquests across the galaxy. Lisa Kane crouched beside him, her hands working on a small device she had built from stolen parts. "The security systems are all focused on the arena floor," she whispered. "Just like we planned. Most of the guards are watching the show, not us." Jake nodded and looked down the long corridor where other prisoners waited in their cells. Aliens from a dozen different worlds stared back at him with hope in their eyes. Over the past weeks, word had spread through the prison levels. The human who killed the Dreadmaw was planning something big. Some believed it was possible to escape this place. Others thought it was just another way to die. "Are you sure about the power grid?" Jake asked. Lisa held up her device. It looked like a simple scanner, but she had turned it into something much more useful. "I mapped every energy conduit in this place. When I overload the main power core, we'll have maybe 10 minutes before the backup systems come online." "That's our window!" A roar erupted from the crowd above as gladiators entered the arena. Jake recognized the sound of weapons clashing against claws and scales. Another prisoner was fighting for his life, while thousands cheered for his death. The thought made Jake's jaw clench tight. "Remember the signal," Jake said, raising his voice so the other prisoners could hear. "When the lights go out, we move fast and we move together. Stay with your groups. Help anyone who falls behind. A large alien with 4 arms spoke up from the cell across the corridor. His name was Thok, and his people had been fighting the Valdrani for 50 years before they were finally defeated. What about the guards in the upper levels? Leave them to me, Jake said. I know their patrol routes. Lisa and her team will handle the technical stuff. Everyone else focuses on getting to the transport bay. The plan was simple but dangerous. Lisa would overload the power systems during the biggest event of the festival, when all attention was on the arena floor. In the darkness and confusion, Jake would lead the prisoners through the maintenance tunnels to the transport bay. They would steal ships and fight their way off the planet. It sounded impossible, but Jake had learned something important during his time in this place. Humans were good at doing impossible things. The crowd above grew louder as the main event began. Jake could hear the announcers describing the fighters, their voices full of excitement. He closed his eyes and thought about his unit, the 15th Expeditionary Force. Were they still looking for him? Did they think he was dead? Lisa touched his shoulder. It's time. She activated her device and pressed it against the wall where the power conduits ran. Numbers flashed on the small screen as she worked. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls, adjusting settings and rerouting energy flows. 30 seconds, she whispered. Jake stood up and gripped the bars of his cell. Around him, other prisoners did the same. Thok cracked his knuckles. A small reptilian alien named Zix hissed quietly. Everyone was ready. The lights went out. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting red shadows down the corridor. In the distance, Jake could hear shouting as arena security tried to figure out what had happened. The cell doors clicked open as the magnetic locks failed. Now! Jake shouted. Prisoners poured out of their cells and followed Jake down the corridor. He had memorized every turn during his weeks in this place. Left at the first junction, down 2 levels using the maintenance stairs, through the water treatment facility, and then to the transport bay. They moved fast but quietly. Jake led the way with a piece of metal he had sharpened into a blade. Behind him, Lisa carried her scanner and a bag of supplies they had stolen from the medical bay. The other prisoners followed in small groups, just like they had practiced. The first guard appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He was reaching for his communication device when Jake hit him. The guard dropped without making a sound. Jake took his weapon and passed the communication device to Lisa. "Can you stop them from calling for help?" he asked. Lisa studied the device for a moment, then pressed several buttons. "I'm jamming their frequencies, but it won't last long." They reached the water treatment facility without seeing any more guards. The large pipes and machinery provided good cover as they moved through the space. Jake could hear the prisoners behind him breathing hard, but no one complained or asked to rest. The transport bay was just ahead. Through a small window, Jake could see rows of small ships that the Valdrani used for moving cargo and personnel. Most of them were empty because everyone was at the festival. 3 guards, Jake whispered after looking around the corner. "They're standing near the control station." Thok moved up beside him. "I can take 2 of them." "I'll get the 3rd, Jake said. "Lisa, get ready to start those ships." They attacked together. Jake and Thok moved fast and quiet, taking down the guards before they could raise an alarm. Lisa ran to the control station and began working on the ship's systems. "I need 2 minutes to get the engines online," she said. Jake looked back at the prisoners filling the transport bay. There were almost 60 of them now, representing species from across the galaxy. Some had been here for years. Others had arrived just days ago. All of them had one thing in common. They refused to give up hope. The ships began to hum as their engines activated. Lisa had managed to start 6 of them at once. "That's all I can do," she said. "The rest are locked down too tight. It would have to be enough." Jake started organizing the prisoners into groups for each ship. The strongest fighters would pilot the ships and defend them if they were attacked. The others would work on navigation and communications. Alarms began blaring. Throughout the facility, red lights flashed, and Jake could hear boots running in the corridors above them. Arena security had finally figured out what was happening. "Time to go!" Jake shouted. The prisoners ran for the ships as the transport bay doors began to open. Through the gap, Jake could see the night sky of Zendar and the lights of the capital city below. Soon, those lights would see something they had never seen before: escaped prisoners fighting for their freedom. The first ship lifted off just as Valdrani guards burst into the transport bay. Weapons fire erupted across the space as the prisoners fought back. Jake helped load the last group of escapees, while Lisa provided covering fire with a stolen guard weapon. "Get to the ship!" Lisa yelled over the noise of battle. Jake grabbed her hand and they ran together toward the last ship. Behind them, the transport bay burned as the revolution began. The arena shook as explosions rocked the upper levels. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the burning Colosseum, watching pieces of metal and stone fall from the ceiling. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to see more than a few feet in any direction. The grand structure that had been built to showcase the Valdrani Empire's power was coming apart around him. Arena Master Veltar emerged from the smoke like a nightmare. The tall Valdrani noble wore ceremonial armor that gleamed despite the destruction around them. His 4 arms moved with deadly grace as he drew 2 curved swords from his belt. His eyes burned with rage and humiliation. "You have destroyed everything," Veltar snarled, his voice echoing through the empty arena. "Centuries of tradition, the pride of our empire, all ruined by one stubborn human." Jake gripped his stolen weapon tighter. It was a simple metal rod he had taken from one of the guards, sharpened to a point on both ends. Not much compared to the arena master's fine blades, but it would have to do. Your empire was built on the suffering of others. It deserved to fall. Above them, the night sky lit up with flashes of light as Captain Ryan Brooks and his rescue fleet fought against Valdrani warships. Jake could hear the distant rumble of ship engines and weapons fire. His people had come for him, just like he knew they would. Veltar circled him slowly, his swords weaving patterns in the air. "Do you think your little rebellion means anything? Even if you escape this world, the Empire spans 1,000 systems. We will hunt you down. We will make you pay for this insult." Maybe, Jake said, keeping his eyes on the arena master's movements. But every empire falls eventually. Today might be your turn. The Valdrani noble attacked without warning. His 4 arms moved like lightning, striking from different angles at the same time. Jake rolled to the side, barely avoiding the deadly blades. He came up swinging his weapon, but Veltar was already moving again. The fight was brutal and fast. Veltar had the advantage of reach and weapons, but Jake had something the arena master did not expect. He had learned from every creature he faced in this place. He fought like the Scalix, using quick strikes and then retreating. He moved, like the shadow beasts, appearing where his enemy did not expect him. Jake's weapon caught one of Veltar's swords and knocked it spinning away. The arena master hissed in anger and pressed his attack with the remaining blade. Steel rang against steel as they fought across the burning arena floor. A section of the upper wall collapsed, sending chunks of stone crashing down between them. Both fighters dove for cover as dust and debris filled the air. When the dust cleared, Jake saw that half the arena was now open to the sky. "Look around you," Jake said, breathing hard. "Your great Colosseum is falling apart, just like your empire. Veltar's remaining sword whistled through the air toward Jake's head. Jake ducked and thrust upward with his weapon. The sharpened metal pierced the arena master's armor and found the soft flesh beneath. Veltar stumbled backward, purple blood flowing from the wound. "Impossible," the Valdrani noble gasped. "I am a master of combat. I have trained for centuries." "You trained to fight in your arena," Jake said, advancing slowly. "With your rules, against creatures in cages. But I learned to fight for my life, to fight for others. That makes all the difference." Veltar made one last desperate attack, throwing his sword like a spear. Jake sidestepped the blade and brought his weapon down in a final strike. The arena master fell to his knees, then collapsed onto the burning floor. Jake stood over his fallen enemy, breathing hard. Around him, the great arena continued to burn. The structure that had held so many prisoners, that had seen so much death and suffering, was finally dying. A sound made him look up. Captain Brooks was rappelling down from a rescue ship that hovered above the arena. Behind him came more Marines from the 15th Expeditionary Force. Jake had never been happier to see familiar faces. "Sergeant Morrison," Brooks called out as he landed. "You look like hell." Jake managed a tired smile. "Good to see you too, Captain. Lisa Kane and the other prisoners?" "Safe," Brooks replied. "Your friend Lisa is already helping our medical team. Treat the injured. The aliens you freed are talking about forming some kind of alliance. They want you to speak at their first meeting." Jake looked around the ruins of the arena one more time. Bodies of guards and gladiator beasts lay scattered across the floor. Flames climbed the walls where the power systems had overloaded. The smell of smoke and death filled the air. But something else filled the space, too. Hope. For the first time. In years, prisoners had escaped this place. Word would spread across the galaxy that the mighty Valdrani Empire could be beaten. Other oppressed peoples would remember this day and find courage to fight their own battles. "The prisoners who didn't make it," Jake said quietly. "The ones who died in the cells in the arena. They should be remembered." Brooks nodded. We'll make sure of that. The whole galaxy is going to know what happened here. They walked together toward the rescue ship as more explosions shook the arena. The Valdrani fleet was retreating, and the rescue operation was almost complete. Soon, this planet would be behind them. Jake stopped at the edge of the arena floor and looked back one last time. In his mind, he could still hear the roar of the crowds, the clash of weapons, the cries of the dying. But he could also hear something else. The voices of prisoners helping each other escape, working together despite their differences. "What are you thinking about?" Brooks asked. "How this place was supposed to break us," Jake said. "Supposed to show that we were just animals. But it did the opposite. It showed what we could become when we refused to give up." As their ship lifted off, Jake watched the arena grow smaller below them. The building would eventually collapse completely, leaving only ruins and ashes. But the idea it had tried to destroy, that thinking beings deserved freedom and dignity, would survive. The arena was meant to hold monsters. Instead, it had forged something the Valdrani Empire never expected. It had created a symbol of resistance that would inspire others across the stars. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything. Jake Morrison, the Marine who had been captured trying to save others, had become something more. He had become hope itself, standing alone in the ashes of tyranny, ready to build something better from the ruins.